It began with a sound so small that William almost ignored it, the soft click of wood shifting somewhere inside the old Kensington cabinet. He'd walked past that piece of furniture 1,000 times, never giving it more than a glance. But tonight, something felt different. The room was quiet, the air unusually still, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he opened the drawer and tugged at the back panel. That's when he saw it, a narrow hidden compartment containing a weathered wooden box sealed shut by age and secrecy. For a moment, he simply stared. The box looked untouched, as if it had been waiting just for him. When he picked it up, dust scattered across his hands like ash from a long-forgotten memory. His pulse thudded as he eased the lid open. Inside lay a small stack of envelopes tied with faded ribbon, each one addressed in Diana's unmistakable handwriting. "To my William," his breath caught. The world around him dimmed. He traced the familiar curves of her script, feeling a sudden wave of warmth and agony all at once. He hadn't seen her handwriting in years, not like this, raw and personal. It was as if she were standing behind him, whispering through the paper. He opened the first envelope with trembling fingers. Diana's words flowed across the page in gentle, steady lines. But the message beneath them wasn't gentle at all. She wrote of heavy eyes watching her, of conversations that stopped the moment she entered a room, of a tension that wrapped itself around her like invisible rope. "If you're reading this," she began, "then you found what they never wanted you to see." That single sentence hollowed something inside him. He sat back slowly, the weight of the page pressing against his chest. Who were they? Why had this been hidden from him? And why here, buried behind a false drawer that no one had touched in decades? He read on, each line peeling back memories he never understood as a child. The hushed calls, the odd glances from staff, the sudden shifts in atmosphere whenever Diana walked into a room. At the time, he thought it was all normal. Now it felt like pieces of a puzzle he was never meant to solve. What unsettled him most was the tone of her writing. She didn't sound frightened in the way the world had once portrayed her. She sounded aware, deliberate, almost prophetic. Diana wrote of nights when shadowy cars followed her home, and phone calls that would ring once and cut off the moment she answered. Rumors had always circulated after her passing, whispered theories buried beneath official statements. But William had spent his entire adult life pushing those whispers aside. It was easier to believe the polished history he'd been given, but this letter made that impossible. As he continued, the ink shifted slightly, as though she had been writing faster, her hand tightening around the pen. She mentioned meetings held behind closed doors, people she felt she could no longer trust, moments when even silence felt unsafe. She didn't name anyone, but she didn't need to. Her message carried enough tension to make his stomach twist. The next page delivered the blow he never saw coming. "If Charles remarries," she wrote, "my sons must know the truth." William froze. The words glowed on the page like a warning pulled from time itself. He read them again, slower this time, trying to steady his breath. The implication wasn't direct, but it carried enough weight to shake the foundations of everything he'd believed. For years, he had tried to accept the official narrative, conditioning himself to trust the version of events the world repeated. But now, faced with his mother's own handwriting, doubt seeped into the corners of his mind like oil spreading through water. He felt anger rise, not at her, but at the years spent burying questions he wasn't allowed to ask. He leaned forward, gripping the letter tight enough to crease the edges. He could almost hear her voice, soft, protective, strained by pressure that no one around her truly understood. Diana had always been warm, always gentle, but here, her words carried a different energy. They spoke of caution, of intuition sharpened by experience, of truths too fragile to say aloud. The next envelope, thinner than the rest, bore a crescent moon drawn in a small, deliberate curve. William recognized it instantly. It was the symbol she used only on her most private notes. He slipped it open, and for the first time, the papers inside weren't written like letters. They were records, dates, initials, underlined passages, patterns she had created to protect what she couldn't safely speak. The deeper he read, the clearer her system became. Certain initials appeared beside events that were never public. Some were repeated in ways that suggested connections, not coincidences. Other pages contained short phrases circled twice, as if she desperately wanted him to notice them someday. The thought made his breath shake. She had made this for him. She had believed he would eventually find it. But someone else had hidden it first. As he laid the letters across the desk, another memory stirred. Someone from his childhood. Someone quiet, yet always near Diana's side. A former aide who had left the palace abruptly after his mother's death. The name resurfaced slowly, like a forgotten melody returning in fragments. He contacted her. When she answered, her voice trembled with a mix of anticipation and fear. She had been waiting for this moment longer than he had. "Your mother knew," she whispered. "She knew more than anyone understood. And she made me promise you'd find the truth when you were ready." Her confession came out in breaths, each one heavier than the last. She spoke of the nights Diana paced the halls in frustration, of letters she wrote and letters she destroyed, of how she feared prying eyes inside the palace more than those outside. The aide had been the last person Diana trusted with her private thoughts, and she had kept that trust alive for decades, despite the personal cost. "They told me to disappear after she passed," the aide confessed, "but I couldn't let her voice vanish." William's throat tightened. The knowledge that his mother had prepared him for this, long before he was old enough to understand, was almost unbearable. But then came the revelation that shattered everything. The aide described a meeting Diana attended just days before her death, a meeting that never appeared in any official schedule. She returned shaken, pale, and uncharacteristically quiet. "She said something was already decided," the aide recalled. "She didn't tell me what, only that she had seen something she wasn't meant to see." William felt the room tilt. The idea that her anxiety had been based on something real, not imagined, not exaggerated, hit him with a force he couldn't contain. It wasn't hysteria, it was clarity, a sense of danger she couldn't fully articulate. He asked the aide if she knew who Diana met. The woman hesitated. "No," she whispered. But someone erased every trace of it. The palace, William realized, hadn't merely overlooked detail, it had actively buried them. The weight of that truth pressed against his ribs. He had lived his entire life serving an institution built on tradition and order, but now he felt like those foundations were shifting beneath his feet. For nights he barely slept, returning again and again to the letters, reading until the words blurred. Every sentence carried a deeper meaning now. Every inked line felt like a fragment of a secret map only he could decode. Catherine watched him from a distance, silent but understanding. She'd always sensed the depth of his unresolved grief, but this was different. This was revelation. She didn't push him to talk. She simply stayed near enough for him to feel anchored. Finally, after days of torment, William did something no future king had ever dared to do. At a public engagement, he stepped to the podium, hands trembling, and spoke from a place no advisor had influenced. "My mother's truth," he said, voice breaking, "will never be forgotten again." The world paused. Some gasped, others stared in disbelief, but millions felt something shift, an unspoken acknowledgement that Diana's legacy had returned in a way no one expected. News outlets exploded with theories. Commentators debated what he meant. Crowds gathered outside her memorial with candles. For the first time in years, her name wasn't tied to tragedy. It was tied to justice. Inside the palace, however, the reaction was cold and calculated. Meetings were held behind closed doors. Advisors tiptoed around him with caution. No one openly challenged him, but the tension was thick enough to feel in the air. That night, William returned to the letters. He opened the final envelope, the one labeled, "For both my sons." This letter wasn't filled with warnings. It was filled with love. Diana wrote about unity, about the bond her boys shared long before the world forced them into roles. "The world will try to separate you," she wrote, "but love will bring you home." William felt the words hit him like a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The distance between him and Harry suddenly felt heavier, more painful. He realized how much their mother would have hated the silence between them. She didn't want them divided. She wanted them whole. He read her final lines slowly, letting each word settle into place. "Love outlives power. Truth outlives fear. And you, my boys, will outlive the darkness." He closed the letter gently. For the first time in years, the ache inside him softened. Not because the pain disappeared, but because he finally understood it. Diana hadn't written these letters to expose anyone. She hadn't written them to spark scandal. She had written them to protect her sons, to guide them, to prepare them for truths she couldn't speak aloud. And now, decades later, her words had found their way home. William placed the letters back into